Okay,
You know, the big American pilgrim.
Well, I'm glad you made it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun.
Okay. It's 6 o'clock and I'm starting the land use board meeting today, which is May the 6th. And we'll start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in the entrance hall of the Beach Haven Municipal Building and mailing the same to the Beach Haven Times and Asbury Park Press. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision for each individual application. Decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Roll call. Mrs. Eddles? Here. Mrs. Leonard? Mr. Balbo?
Here.
Mr. Tinquist?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Jenna?
Here.
Mayor Davis?
Here.
Mr. Medal? Mrs. Ballmiller?
Here.
Mr. Lafredo? Mr. Wenger?
Here.
Miss King? Yeah. Mr. Halperin?
Here.
It's everybody. Do you have any announcements? I do. Bonnie Lenhart's sick, so I'm. Anybody have any announcements? No? Okay, so I guess we will start with the public hearing, and the first thing on our agenda is Coastal Holdings. Turn it over to our attorney.
Mr. Coleman.
Our attorney.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. My name's Tom Coleman. I'm appearing on behalf of MIH Holdings. You may all recall that I was here last March and obtained a preliminary and final site plan approval with one impervious coverage variance. That the memorializing resolution, there was an expectation that that would be adopted at the April meeting, and that didn't happen. At the May public meeting, a resolution was adopted that added certain conditions that MIH took exception with. And that ultimately resulted in litigation. And a year later, I'm happy to report that through your capable counsel, Mr. Riso, we've come to a settlement agreement. And that's why we're here this evening, is to have the board adopt the original resolution prepared by our prior counsel. Mr. Riso?
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. So, members of the board, we've addressed this previously. There is a conditional settlement. And that conditional settlement revolves around the resolution that's before you that should have been distributed, right, Gina? It is a resolution memorializing the approval of this application. And so everyone is clear, because I know that there was an issue with the deck, whether we want to call it the second floor deck, the deck that may or may not expand, and I think it does expand beyond the building footprint. That issue is still on the table, but it is on the table for the DEP through CAFRA. We don't have jurisdiction over that, this board. That's an outside agency approval. It is in this resolution. In fact, part of the settlement made it clear that not only does MIH have to get all outside agency approvals, it specifically references the DEP and CAFRA. So they will go after this resolution is memorialized. If that happens tonight, they will go there. They will do what the DEP tells them they have to do. If they have to make application and get a permit, they'll do that. And it'll be up to the DEP whether or not to issue that permit. Mr. Little has been in touch with the DEP on that issue, and I'd like him to just advise the board what he's learned through his contacts at the DEP.
So the original question was building within the footprint of Morrison's former restaurant, and the applicant did get an exemption to build within the footprint. And my correspondence with CAFRA is that that's correct, but if there's a deck expansion going beyond the footprint on a commercial structure, it needs a CAFRA permit. So I believe part of this resolution of outside agency approvals is if they want that deck, they have to go to the appropriate CAFR agency and make the formal CAFR application for that additional deck extension beyond the footprint of the original building.
And Mr. Coleman, you and I discussed this, you understand that?
That's correct, Mr. Russo. That's my understanding of Mr. Little's representation. Yes.
So with that being said, we're not hearing the application into, we've already heard it, the board already approved it. What we need is a motion to approve the memorializing resolution. The members eligible to vote on the resolution are as follows, and this is because under the municipal land use law, only those members of the land use board who vote in favor of an application can vote on the memorializing resolution. I have the transcript from that hearing. Here's who can vote this evening. Mayor Davis, board member, Tom's not here either, right?
No.
Forgive me because I don't know everyone. I don't want to offend anybody. It's, I'm going to say board member instead of Ms. or Mrs. Member Eddles?
Yes.
Member Steve, not yet. There's no motion. These are the
No,
people who
I'm
can
just
vote.
saying,
Okay.
yes, that's correct. It's your pronunciation.
Member Stevens, member Jenna, and board member Wenger. Those are the only people who are eligible to vote. So if one of those members can make a motion to approve the resolution, then we need a second, and then we'll do a roll call of those members, please.
Motion to approve.
It was,
I second.
so tell me what it- motion and it'll second, okay?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Eddles?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Jenna?
Yes.
Mr. Wenger?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Thank you, members of the board. Good evening.
You get a signed copy of the resolution to the board secretary, Mr. Coleman, and then good luck to you and the client with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're moving on to application 2024-04, which is at 210 North Bay Avenue.
Good evening, James Rabin on behalf of the applicant Kamal Levy LLC. So this is a preliminary and final major site plan application, and this involves the Silver Sun property that everybody's familiar with. The applicant was previously before the board for preliminary and final major subdivision approval, and that was approved to subdivide the property to create 5 residential building lots and 1 mixed-use site, which is the subject of tonight's application, and that's new lot 5.06. And what the applicant is proposing at that property is a mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor and 2 residential apartments above. Each residential apartment has 2 bedrooms. And while the application calls for the commercial space to be 1 unit, and that is the applicant's intention, they would like to have the option of potentially having 2 units. So I would just like to flesh that out a little bit with the board if that's possible. But again, the intent is to have 1, but it doesn't affect the parking requirement, whether or not there's 1 unit or 2. So the applicant would like to have that flexibility if the board were amenable to that. So since we submitted the original application, there was a revised plan that was sent in when the subdivision plan was submitted to the Ocean County Planning Board. There was, they required a site triangle, a 10 by 10 corner of the property for a future traffic light project. So we had to remove the corner of the building that you see now. There's a triangular corner of the building that's missing. So that was a result of a county requirement. So the plans were revised just to reflect the revised design of the building. And Sarah from CWB Architecture had to revise the building in accordance with that. So it affected the square footage slightly of the building. But I have Jim Brzezowski here to present testimony regarding the site plan. We are requesting one variance for impervious coverage. And then Sarah is going to discuss the design of the building. And then I don't see the applicant here yet, but he's supposed to be here, so hopefully we'll hear from the applicant as well. At this time, I'll call Mr. Brzezowski.
You swear affirm the testimony you give before the board this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
For the record, my name is James Brzezowski. I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey and an employee at Horn Tyson and Yoder since 1997.
Thank you. Mr. Brzezowski, you've testified before this board numerous times.
Yes.
The board accept Mr. Brzezowski's qualifications?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brzezowski, you prepared the site plan that we submitted with this application?
Yes.
And if you would just give an overview for the board, please, as to what we're proposing. I know obviously as part of the subdivision application, the existing building is going to be demolished. And then if you could explain to the board what we're proposing on this new lot 5.06.
Sure. This property is to the. Yep.
Here it is. It might take me.
I'll come to this up.
No.
Jim, do you guys have a blow up or an easel you can use it at other areas?
I've come to rely on the TV.
I know.
So I believe.
It doesn't fall back, right? I still use legal pad. Because sometimes my computer doesn't work. I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. So this property is located to the southwest of the intersection of 3rd Street and Bay Avenue. As Mr. Raven indicated, it's currently developed with the Silver Mall, the Silver Sun Mall. This property has 87 foot of depth off of Long Beach Boulevard, 93 foot of width along Long Beach Boulevard. And due to this, the subdivision, a 10 by 10 triangular portion at the northeast corner was dedicated to Ocean County for future traffic light improvements. So the property now has an area of 8,041 square feet. This is new lot 5.06 of the tract. The subdivision for that tract hasn't been perfected yet. So it's still proposed lot 5.01 until we sign the map and get it filed, we're getting close. And what we're proposing to do is construct a mixed-use building on this site. It's a 2-story mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor and two apartments on the second floor. The building will be located on the eastern portion of the property. The western portion of the property will have an 8-car parking lot. So we've got 8 cars on the easterly side of the parking lot facing the building and a 24-foot wide drive aisle on the western side of the where the cars are parking. And then to the west of that is a 10-foot wide vegetated buffer that we're proposing between this property and the new residential uses to the west. There's a dumpster proposed, or a 10 by 10 trash enclosure at the southern end of the drive aisle. We are seeking with the application a variance for impervious lot coverage where 60% is the maximum permitted. We are seeking a variance to provide 83.5% impervious coverage. Of that 83.5%, 41% of it is, or 41% of the total lot area is porous pavers. It's the parking lot. As you know, in the borough of Beach Haven, anywhere you drive a car, park a car, no matter what the surface, is considered to develop a commercial property with with a building and parking, and utilize only 60% of the lot, is kind of a tough, tough act, tough to come up with a plan to provide adequate parking on a property when we're only allowed 60% impervious. So to balance that, we're providing the entire parking lot is porous pavers. So the remaining portion of the property that will be porous pavers is 42.2%, which is below the 60%. But per the ordinance, 83.5% impervious is what we're providing. The only other item is that we're not providing a 15 by 30 foot loading zone. Typically on these smaller commercial properties, most of the deliveries are by UPS or FedEx, and the FedEx trucks, they just kind of park in the street. They could park in the driveway, in the drive aisle for the few minutes that they're at the property. But we're seeking a waiver or variance, whichever the case may be, for a loading zone.
Question for you, Jim. On this.
Fire away.
So when you do the calculation for the impervious coverage, that is strictly the owner's property and does not include the county utility sections of that property?
No, that is just the 8,000, whatever I said, and change area within the property lines.
Okay. Are the bricks that are going to go on the front of that on Bay Avenue, are those considered impervious coverage?
Not on this, only if they cross over so there's basically 10 feet between the face of the curb and the building. Those 10 feet would not impact our impervious coverage.
No, suggesting it should maybe though. That's all. So it's part of the, your testimony. So
That's basically all I got.
And-
Landscape, right?
Pardon me?
10 feet he's talking about.
Yeah, the 10 feet to the landscape buffer is to the west side.
I'm talking.
What
about-
Mr. Jenna is talking about is to the east side, the sidewalk along Bay Avenue.
It just follows the master plan of the town. Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's currently a concrete sidewalk. We're just changing it to the brick paver sidewalk per the streetscape ordinance.
And I apologize. I initially said it was just one variance. There is also the one for the loading zone, as Mr. Brzezowski noted. And Mr. Brzezowski, if you would just address the proofs relative to the two variances that we're requesting.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it would be tough to develop a property commercially with a building of usable size and parking without the impervious coverage variance. To offset the variance that we're seeking, we're constructing the parking lot with porous pavers. So it's our belief that the benefits outweigh the detriment, in that the entire property, the entire 8,000 square feet just about, is covered by a building today. So we're actually reducing the impervious on this 8,000 square foot lot.
And do you feel that the proposed development would negatively impact the public good or surrounding property owners?
No, I do not. I think, we're providing the parking that is required by the borough. This is I feel like a modest size commercial development. It's 2 stories, 1 story commercial, 1 story of apartment above it. I feel like this is what Beach Haven wants on these commercial properties.
It's your understanding with respect to signage that any proposed signage will comply with the zoning ordinance?
Yes. Obviously, they won't be freestanding signs.
Right.
I
have a question about the trash enclosure.
Sure.
Trash enclosure meaning dumpster, or trash enclosure meaning public borough pickup?
I don't know. I would think that it's going to be private carrier. just because it's a commercial
Yeah. 'cause
building.
It's just so set back on the property. When you're reversing in there, you're gonna hear the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mr. Raymond, we are client here to testify and answer.
Yes, they are here now.
or I'll ask him.
Okay. And just one comment about that trash enclosure. Mr. Little's letter pointed out he had a thought about backing out of that last southernmost spot. Where we have a curb line that goes, the southern curb line in the parking area goes straight across. And I think what he is implying is that if we could bump the curb 2 or 3 feet more south to allow a car to kind of back to the south before it heads north, it might be a little easier for a car to maneuver that way. Because the area to the west of the parking aisle is a landscape buffer, it was my thought that that little area wouldn't be needed to turn. If the board thought that they would like 2 or 3 feet of a recession in that area, we could provide that. We may have to reduce the size of the trash enclosure to like 8 by 10. That was my comments, but I think that the drive aisle, the way it's designed, is adequate because we're not backing up into another row of cars. We're backing up into a landscape buffer.
Why don't we leave it the way it is? Based on your testimony, you're right now backing up into another set of cars, so they should be able to back up all the way and make the turn.
That I agree.
I have a question regarding the loading. If we don't know whether it's going to be 1 commercial unit or 2, how do we know that a loading or unloading zone in the future, we don't know what the commercial property are going to look like, will not be a requirement, or you won't need a loading or unloading zone?
Well, the loading zone is based on the area of the building. I think it's 1 for every 4,000 square feet. So the commercial portion of the building is less than 4,000 square feet. So 1 loading zone is required. And we're seeking a variance from providing that 1 loading zone. If it's 2 buildings, they're probably even going to be smaller buildings and less need for a larger type vehicle.
And as of right now, if there were 2 units, as I stated, it's likely going to be 1, but if there were 2, they would both be retail. If it was another use, you know, they wouldn't be able to put a restaurant or something in there without coming back before the board. So as of right now, it's all retail we're proposing on the first floor. It's just a question of whether it's going to be 1 retail unit or 2.
So, Mr. Raymond, just for the record, so the board's clear, if there's a second use, it'll also be retail, and as a condition of approval, your client agrees that they will, if there's any other use, whether it's the 1 or 2, they will come back to the board for approval.
Yes.
So everyone understands that it's only going to be retail, even if there's a second, it's assigned.
Right.
So in the future, have a second commercial use space, it will be limited to retail.
Right.
And it'll be in the resolution, and that's a great condition.
Yep.
But deliveries be expected from the front or the back? Because there is a way in from the back, correct?
Yeah, there is a way in from the back. Yes.
How would the deliveries be expected to occur?
We'll have Robert answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I would, at the whim of the UPS driver.
I mean, there is sufficient room for a truck to pull in there. We just can't stripe it as a loading zone because it blocks the vehicular access. But I would assume that in the summer, if they can't park anywhere, they're going to pull in the drive aisle, probably do the delivery and then leave. And even though we can't designate it and stripe it, more than likely, that's a pretty sizable area that they could pull into regardless of the truck size. So I think it's going to work in terms of deliveries. It's not a restaurant, so we're not going to have bread and this other stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was,
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the trash pickup. Mr. Little's letter suggested that you're going to discuss the carding and timing of the trash pickup off of Bay. You want to talk about that, or?
yeah, I think that's more for the applicant to weigh in on. Should I swear him in now to answer these questions, or would you like me to hold off?
Let's finish, see if the board has any more questions.
Okay.
Mr. Brzezowski, and then we'll go on to your next witness. Does anyone else have any questions? I
And
know I do.
I'll also add to, just with respect to the parking, there was a note in Mr. Little's letter about designating residential spaces versus commercial. We would like to designate 3 spaces as residential spaces. There are 3 spaces required for the residences. And what we were thinking is designating the southerly 2 spaces and then the northerly most space adjacent to the handicap space. Those 3 would be designated, not necessarily specific to each unit. It'll just be for residential parking only. And then the balance of the spaces would be for the commercial, or if it was overflow on the residents, they could also park in the remaining spots, but 3 will be designated for the residences only, and signage will be placed to that effect.
That was my one question. Mr. Brzezowski, you had the opportunity to review Mr. Little's letters of April 25 and then the subsequent letter of April 29,
Yes,
based on the revised plans that were submitted.
yes,
And you agree with all his comments,
yes,
and there's a condition of approval. You'll comply with Mr. Little's comments.
yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Just one quick one, lighting.
All
We're
right.
doing building lighting, no parking.
Yeah, we're not, yeah, we're, with a size parking lot like this, I think building mounted incandescent lights will get the job done.
Shields or something.
Yeah.
You have, and you're gonna have new residents next door.
Yep.
Okay.
Regarding Mr. Little's letter, there was also the Architectural Advisory Committee issued some recommendations. Do you concur with those recommendations, or?
Was there a separate letter issued by the architectural committee?
You like it?
Yeah, I don't think I received that, actually.
You can have mine, you can have mine.
Thank you.
Mr. Little dated January 5, or Mr. Raven, you have it now dated January 5?
Yes, that's the one that I was just provided. I remember meeting with them. I just don't believe I saw this letter. I'm just going to provide this to the architect to have a quick look as well. So maybe I'll just reserve that question for the architect after she's had an opportunity to review the letter.
You good?
Any other questions for Mr. Brzezowski? Thank you. And actually, yeah, why don't I call Sarah Jennings next? We'll have her go through the design and then we'll bring up the applicant to ask any operational questions.
Hi, how are you?
You swear affirm the testimony you give before this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
Mr. Little?
Thank you. Ms. Jennings, you've testified before this board previously, correct? And all of your licenses are still current?
Yes, I'm a New Jersey registered architect, and owner of CWB Architecture in Manhattan.
Thank you. If you could just provide the board with a general overview of the design of the building?
Mr. Raven, just for the record, you want
Sure.
to offer her as an expert?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, does the board accept Mrs. Jennings' qualifications?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But could you pick up the mic, maybe hold it like.
Is
Closer
this
to
better?
your mouth is better.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as was previously mentioned, this is a mixed-use building. The ground floor will be a retail space with access to a ramp to a loading zone, if you will, that has an elevator and access to a second floor storage space for the retail. There's also 2 entrances to 2 separate apartments on the west side of the building. there's two different, slightly different sized units based on the site triangle that's cut off on the corner of Third and Bay. Both apartments are 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathroom, about 1,050 square feet. Things I wanted to clarify from the engineer's letter. There was a mathematical error in the commercial space. Each floor listed in the floor area chart, where it says ground floor commercial, and then the first floor commercial storage and mechanical, those numbers are correct, but they should add up to 2,839 square feet, 39.8 square feet. That area for the commercial space includes everything except for the sprinkler room and the entries and apartment storage for the second floor residential units. Another thing I wanted to address from the engineer's letter was about the ground floor retail space building elevation that previously approved applications were at elevation around 5.5, where we're proposing 4.67 for the ground floor commercial elevation. There's two reasons behind that. One is the existing building is 2 steps above the ground, and the owner can testify more to this. That was a level they were comfortable with based on previous floods that have happened in the building. Secondly, to provide the extra square footage for a ramp for another 12 inches in height will be significant. We wanted to keep all the kind of back of house entrances away from Bay Ave so that you could maximize the retail facade and windows. So there just wasn't quite enough space to have the ramp come up another 12 feet in length, 12 inches in height. The exterior of the building is designed in a traditional style. We're proposing cedar impression siding. One of the things the review committee had requested was if it was cedar impression siding, it was in a natural color, which is fine with the owner. That's what we're planning on doing. There's some metal roof accents and brackets along the roof line that separates the commercial space from the residential on Bay Ave. On the 3rd Street elevation, behind the wall, it's a little hard to see, but you'll see like a dashed line. There is a staircase that leads to one of the apartments. So that's the reason for a lot of siding and fewer windows on that wall. But we do anticipate some signage to designate where the parking is in that blank space on the exterior elevation. That's all I've got right now.
James, did you have a chance to look at the January 5 memo prepared by the AAC?
Yes.
And you concur with the comments contained therein?
Yeah, so this went along with some of the things that we discussed. The siding I had mentioned, the owner was going to stick to the cedar impressions, but we'll certainly do a natural color. And then the mention of the, I did want to talk about that. The mention on the North 3rd Street side where you see the second floor residential is kind of cantilevered or overhanging over the ramp and the walkway that lead to kind of the back of house apartment entrance and entry up to the second floor commercial storage space. One of the reasons for that was to maximize the site, as Jim Brzezowski testified earlier. We didn't want to go for a parking variance. It was important to not need that. So having the amount of parking that was required really kind of defined how deep in the east-west direction that the building could be. And for that reason, we took advantage a little more of the space we could get an overhang on the second floor to make the apartment units reasonable size. They're still modestly sized, but in my opinion, without it, they would be really hard to rent or sell, whatever the owner intends to do. And the comments on the rear or the west side elevation, we have minimal roof overhangs over the entry to the apartment doors and entry to the well, second exit of the retail space and door that leads up to the second floor commercial space. Again, because it's facing a parking lot and it's not as visible from the street, we're keeping this side simple, also with the large overhang on the second floor. There's I guess not a lot more dimension that you can create because of, we're trying to use every square foot we can for those second floor apartment spaces.
So how big is the overhang? Just,
It's
I didn't think it was that big, but.
it's changed with the site triangle too. So it actually, it varies. So,
But the overhang's in the rear, correct?
it is in the rear. Yep. It is in the rear. So the, apartment unit 1 is overhanging 2 feet from the first floor face of the building. And apartment unit 2 is overhanging 3 feet. And that was because of the site triangle when the county requested, you know, angled cutout on the corner. We kind of absorbed some of that space on Bay Ave, so we gave it back to the west side of the building.
So that's not considered a substantial overhang, right? A couple of feet.
No, we have a pretty deep floor joist, so we're
Okay.
anticipating it's,
So I have a question about the elevator you spoke of, is that strictly commercial only?
yes.
So there's no elevator service to the apartments?
No, there's not.
I have a question regarding the materials, the AAC's letter for the railing material, encourage Intex railing materials. Can you address that?
So I'd have to talk to the owner about that. We only really have railings on the back and then on the upper decks in the residential units. So I'd have to confer with him to see, you know, I don't see any reason why not, but I'll have to ask him about that.
And AZAC for the fascia,
Mhm.
they recommend that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah. I don't see them.
The covered decks,
They're on the first floor.
The entry deck and the retail space?
That's an entry duct into the retail.
Into the
space
retail
on the
space.
lower floor.
Yes,
Okay. And there's no deck on the upper floor, or there are?
there's 2 decks. They're small off of the kitchen
Okay.
on each unit.
on the front, the back.
On the front, on Bay Ave.
So what type of railings would you be using for the, what type of materials for the,
It'll be some kind of a vinyl or composite. It will be the same for that and for the commercial space. But that's what I was talking about. I'd have to check with Robert. If he's okay with using the Intex.
Jamie, doesn't the AAC recommend composite?
yeah, we don't recommend vinyl.
Are we talking about just the railings?
Talking about the rail-
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Railing systems being used a lot.
Okay, and that's the composite, the Intex?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's composite.
So we'd ask that you use that.
Right.
So we can find out, we would bring to that as a condition of approval.
Yeah, I figure we'll wait for the applicant's testimony to address that issue, if that's okay.
Frank, I have a question regarding the flooding. Is there any concern with the elevation?
Well, we mentioned it in our letter, but she addressed it, Sarah addressed it, but they also have to flood-proof the building up to the base flood +1. So the building's gonna be flood-proof like any other commercial building. You know, some people are raising their buildings a little bit higher, but if you have enough room, you can do that. In this case, the applicant's aware of the flooding and aware that the elevation they're proposing is what they've been accustomed to in the existing structure. And they haven't had a problem, so.
So there's no history of a problem?
No, so, and I don't have an issue based on the testimony we're hearing and the fact that It has to meet the new flood code and be flood proof.
Any further questions for Mrs. Jennings? Thank you. At this time, I'll call Robert Levy.
You swear affirm the testimony you'll give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your address for the record, please.
24 Ridge Road,
Make sure you speak in the mic.
24 Ridge Road, West Long Branch.
Mr. Levy, are you a member of the applicant LLC that filed this application here this evening?
Yes,
Okay, and you're authorized to speak on behalf of the LLC?
yes.
Okay, there were a few questions that the board had relative to the operation of the site. Why don't we start first with the most recent, the railings. The Architectural Advisory Committee recommended Intex railing system. Are you okay with installing that throughout the building?
I really don't know the difference between vinyl and Tex.
Okay,
Not familiar.
I'm sure there's a cost difference.
Had a feeling.
You don't have a lot of railing on this building?
Right.
I believe so. Based on the cost of the rest of the building, I don't know if it'll be that significant.
Yeah,
Okay.
But it definitely gives you a nicer appearance.
right,
Mr. Reed, I'm getting a sense that the board wants,
right.
they want this application approved, wants a new type railing, so I don't know if you want to take a minute to talk to your client's representative, I don't know how you want to handle this, but I think we need a definitive answer.
Right.
To the question.
Do you want to speak about it for a few minutes, Robert? Or if you want, the board will give us a few minutes. We can
Okay.
talk to Sarah and Jim. Would you prefer that?
Yes.
Okay. If the board wouldn't mind just giving us a few minutes.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. But they didn't. And Jack. Oh, yeah.
That was my concern. They didn't have any site plan to you. So,
And for the future, this is all.
This one will be another. But that's above and.
It'll be more seamless. Okay. Right.
Go break it.
Jamie?
Yeah. Well, I had mine done that. 2015. So, I mean, I do. Yes, I mean, sometimes.
I was gonna go outside.
I just think it's just the same. What were your fees?
Of course, I can do it.
It's the ordinance.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. I had it done in June and I had it done on a Monday. And I went to a benefit on Friday. First, remember the house. for the
Make that as a
weeks.
condition of
Was Al, and,
PSS Jerry Jetta getting in the water. And it was supposed to have been over the weekend. But the lift that puts the boat in the water needs a new fuel pump. Where you had it? Over at the Mordecai.
So what's that? When do you have it?
Sure. So you couldn't dump it in. It's all ready to go. Is it the same?
That.
In the future, though. There are two different things.
Yeah. I was learning. I was doing this. Yeah, I know. But you need to. I know. If you drive that driving.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not using it, it's just like.
This will be a nice improvement in town. Really? There's some truth to that.
Right.
And, oh, sorry, Robert.
I have two girls, but they're so clever. Well, my kids, I have one in Belgium, on California. An hour and a half. And you're here.
Okay. Thank you for providing us with time to discuss these issues. So Mr. Levy is willing to agree to the in-text railings throughout the entire building. So that can become a condition of the approval in the event the board were to approve the application. And one other thing we just wanted to discuss in the material section of this letter from the Architectural Advisory Committee, there's reference to the desire for certain cedar impressions of a natural color. Mr. Levy said he would like the ability to potentially have a light blue or something like that. I don't know exactly what the definition of a natural color is, but he didn't want to necessarily be limited to a white or beige. I don't know if you want to elaborate. Were there any other colors you had in mind other than potentially a light blue?
Maybe light gray, light blue, nothing outlandish. And I had mentioned that when we had the conference call with the committee.
Okay.
And they seemed open to it. And also one of the members of the committee mentioned that we don't want it to look exactly like the building across the street. And it was a very good point.
Right.
Separate it. So we're not looking for any kind of outlandish colors whatsoever.
Okay. So I guess we just wouldn't want it to be a condition of the approval that we had to use a natural color, certainteed cedar impression.
Would you be willing to meet with the Architectural Advisory Committee before you pick the siding out?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, as long as I don't want it to necessarily be conditioned on their approval necessarily. There's a fine line. I would like to be more within the applicant's control as far as the color, but the applicant's testifying it would be, if it's a color, a light color, But certainly, we'd be open to discussing it with the Architectural Advisory Committee.
So how about this, Mr. Ray? We'll raise a condition of approval. The applicant will meet again with the AAC to try to reach an agreement with respect to the natural color that would be used for the certain cedar impressions.
Assuming a light blue or something of that sort is considered a natural color, yes.
The sky's blue.
Yeah, it's a natural color.
Okay,
The color is to avoid, hot pink,
right, and
neon
that's
green,
certainly not the intention, right,
No,
Mr. Levy?
absolutely.
Okay.
something like that, and
Right.
something not to match every other building that's come up or is coming up in
Right,
in the future.
okay, so yeah, that's,
Keep it unique in your own,
sure,
not outlandish.
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, and then earlier, Mr. Levy, there was a question about the trash enclosure. Can you comment on what you expect as far as the frequency of trash pickup and regular garbage versus recycle?
Recycle, cardboard and recycle together are picked up by the town all these years. And then as far as the trash, we have it done only once a week, private pickup. And they're quite early in the morning. Definitely before 9 a.m. they're picking up the trash.
So you
Private
expect
contractor,
that schedule to be able to continue with the new building?
absolutely.
Okay, so it would be a dumpster that's picked up privately, and then the recycle would be picked up by the municipality?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim, how close is that to the residential property, the building?
How close is it to the adjacent lot 5.05? Correct. See, well, yeah, Jim, you can comment on that
Roughly 15 feet
from the property line.
from the west edge of the trash enclosure to the property line, about 15 feet.
So I guess in your view, it wouldn't be cumbersome for the residential owners to hear the trash being picked up and whatever, you know.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any way to avoid that, right?
This mixed-use building is in the business district. Anybody buying a property adjacent to a business district, now there are certain things that you have to kind of deal with.
I understand.
I mean, personally, my house is close to a restaurant. We're not immediately adjacent to, but close to it. And at 5 a.m, sometimes you can hear the garbage being picked up. It takes about 30 seconds and it's over.
Do they even have recycle bins that you roll out the blue ones, or just truck it back all the way in?
I'm not sure about the recycle. I was assuming that we're gonna get for the trash, a basic dumpster to be picked up.
Trash area.
Yeah.
How are the recycles picked up currently? Are they?
Right now, we have a separate dumpster for the recyclables.
Okay. Would you expect that to be what you would utilize this time around as opposed to, because if you use the cans, don't you have to roll those out to the curb? Okay.
Well, that could be done. Again, it's this commercial space now is about 10% of what we've been operating till now. So I don't expect to be nearly as much trash. We have to roll it out. It's not a problem.
So I guess you'd like to have the flexibility of, with respect to the recyclables, a dumpster or the cans, depending on what the volume of the recyclables is?
Yeah.
Okay. And earlier, there was a discussion about limiting the commercial use to just retail. You're okay with that?
As opposed to food?
Yes, or really any other commercial use. So there's, there are potentially other permitted commercial uses that could be there instead of retail, but we're stating that we're agreeing to limit it to retail, even if there are 2 commercial units. They could always come back before the board, but I just wanted you to understand that.
Okay, yes, it's fine. Okay, retail.
Right.
The business office is one thing, the real estate office is a whole different story.
Right.
Somebody starts doing, weekly rentals and people are looking for keys and,
Mhm.
I mean, if it was a business office, a professional office, I don't think it'd be an issue. But if it goes beyond that, you can get in a lot of traffic. all of a sudden.
Right.
My understanding is the one unit is gonna be retail. If it's two, as a condition of approval, I think the applicant is hard pressed not to agree
Right.
that the second use will also be retail. Again, so you're clear, you can always come back to the board.
Mhm.
If the
Right.
second use is gonna be something else,
Okay.
that's fine, as long as it's a permitted use within the business district or you
Right.
want to ask for a use variance, but
Right.
I don't think the board should be put in a position of having to agree to something other than retail in the event that there's a second commercial use there.
I agree. Any other further questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you, Mr. Levy.
Thank you.
Those are all of our witnesses.
Yeah, Frank, do you have any comments?
Not at this point. I think the applicants provided the testimony necessary for the variances and let's hear from the public and then.
I just have one question.
Go ahead.
Are there any pictures of the south side of the building? Because a couple of comments with the, from the Architectural Advisory Committee was on the north elevation, you kind of have like a mushroom effect. And we did ask if that could be changed, but like Mrs. Jennings said, they're really, maximizing their space. The apartments are moderately sized, so there was really no workaround with that. But I was we also made a comment of what, if it was possible to kind of transition a little bit better between the south side of the building and the property directly adjacent to it.
Right now, those two properties connect each other.
So from the south side, you're really only gonna be able to see it over top of, it's really faint, but you can see on the Bay Ave side, the building next to it and the roof line coming into it.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a blank wall and it's gonna have to be fire rated. So there's not gonna be windows or anything ornamental on it, because it's right at the property line.
Right, but it's just kind of like
But
completely flat.
So is there a space between those two
Yeah,
buildings?
is there a
or not?
space right now? It looks like they connect each other.
So Robert says that they're not touching, but I haven't been able to get to it at a vantage point where I can see, like if they're
Is that
right
the
next to each other.
paintings?
I mean, I don't think I could put my hand.
Yeah, but they're not, that's right up against it.
Right,
Maybe I
but
could. I mean, I
like,
don't
this
know.
is just like,
It looks to me as if there might be a small gap between the two buildings. And on the Bay Avenue side, somebody put like a flashing or something
something
to
here.
cover the gap. So when you're looking at the building from Bay Avenue, you don't see a gap.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it would be, I mean, besides having a roof line that slopes, right now it's a wall and a parapet that you can see.
It's not like
It's
that.
still gonna be a blank face on that side.
No.
Yeah, you can't have windows or anything, it's really close.
Right.
So it's just gonna be up against the other building.
But it's all fireproofed and everything. so.
Yeah, that's,
It's just like the roof line just looks so, it doesn't transition well with the adjacent building. It just kind of stops. It doesn't transition at all.
That also had to do with the space that we had.
Right, again, it goes back to I just want to go on record saying that, this was a over 25,000 square foot property that was subdivided into 5,000 square foot single family homes. So the space could have had a little bit more flexibility if you didn't maximize the space.
I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but to clarify, I think the biggest residence is 2,800.
No, I mean the single family lots in the back, space could have been taken from one of those lots and everything could have been kind of a little bit more working together with the site. You could have had the loading zone, you could have had a little bit more impervious. It just could have all been a little bit easier and a little bit more architecturally pleasing, but you're working with the space that you're giving. But I just wanted to,
There's also the jog on the south side where proposed lot 5.05 is. So when we initially were talking about it all together, it didn't seem like it would become much more usable if we, cut
Yeah.
lot 5.05 in half. You'd end up with a 20-foot wide sliver that jogs farther back than the current south lot line. But if Jim can talk more about that. Question.
I guess it just would be nice to see an elevation of how it might look from Bay Avenue. I mean,
Like a 3D?
yeah, or just even, if you had drawn a bit of the building on the south side next to the new building, just to give an idea of how they would fit.
It is. It's just really light. It is wrong.
It is?
Can you reference the page of the plan?
Yeah, I'm.
Do you want me to share it?
Tina, can maybe bring it up on the screen for us?
It's just really faint on the print.
What page are we talking?
Are we talking about?
YouTube.
yeah, but we're looking east, like we can't see, if we're looking north, we can't see what that, we just kind of have a 2D version.
Yeah, I think they're saying they would have liked to have seen a south elevation. I don't know how much of it would actually be visible from the south.
I got it. So- I think I can see it better. up there.
Well, if you, I guess if you look at the North Third Street side, the portion toward Bay Ave on the left side of the page. That would be essentially what the face of it looks like from the street. Beyond that, it's going to be blocked by the adjacent building.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'm going to open the floor or do we need a motion? Okay, so is there a motion to open the floor to the public?
Also moved.
For a second?
I'll second.
Okay, the floor is open. Anybody on Zoom or anybody in the room that wants to come forward and make a comment? Yeah, please come forward, state your name and address and the list.
Chief Ellender, under South Bay Ave. Just wanted to ask, sorry,
That's okay. Do you swear affirm the testimony you give before this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Did you guys, I know that last time this came up, I asked about some of the considerations with the battery substation that's next door. Did you guys find out any information or any considerations been made for this particular thing?
One thing I can tell you, it's not directly adjacent because we have a residential lot that comes all the way back to Atlantic City Electric, and you have a adjoining building that borders it. This is one lot away.
Yeah, absolutely, Frank, and I understand that. And, public safety comes first. I have to think about that. You're adding 2 more residents. They're going to be right next door to it. And we don't know specifically what would be in the event of a catastrophic failure. So I just had to ask the question if there was any consideration, if you guys took that in. However, I will say this, with the, what was talked about last time is exactly on the site plan where the loading zone comes straight back, which is a consideration that I took in for, fire suppression, where we'd be able to back the ladder up and we have the other parking lot. So we would be able to make a better stop on anything that would potentially happen. So I do thank you guys for having that included and keeping it within the site plan so that we can, have better suppression. So thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak? Anybody on, is there anybody on Zoom? No?
one has
Anybody
their
else?
hand raised.
My name is William Barris, and I own 208 North Bay, which is adjacent to this property. We weren't noticed, so not that I'm aware of. Nobody-
Hold on. Please, there's simple matters. Please raise your hand. You swear affirm testimony you're going to put this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Where do you reside?
I reside at 100 Northwest Avenue, Beach Haven, New Jersey.
Just before this one, you were saying, so you own the property at 208 North Bay Avenue?
208 North Bay Avenue, yes.
And it's your position, I take it, that that property is within 200 feet of the subject site?
Touches it,
And that's a yes?
yes,
Okay. And you're the owner?
yes. Me and my two partners, yes.
Mr. Reagan, do you have the 200-foot list? I do. Is 208 North Bay on it?
Was sent to my house in Morristown. Okay,
That's got to be the address on the tax record.
yeah, we'll have to fix that. That's not correct. Yeah, okay, so I can't blame Jim for this, right?
And just so everyone's clear, Mr. Burris, your point's very well taken because notice is jurisdictional, but under the municipal land use law, it's still interpreting it, the applicant has the right to rely on the 200-foot list. So I can tell you, and I've experienced this in person in court, if the list doesn't include a property that's within 200 feet, and therefore that property owner doesn't get notice, the applicant has the right to rely on the list. So Mr. Little's advices are correct. You should go to the tax department and ask them to update the list to make sure that notices for 208 North Bay, if that's where you want them to go to 208 North Bay.
Thank you, and welcome to the board. I appreciate your here. Thank you.
Anybody else like to come up and speak? Nobody? Nobody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom?
Let me double check.
If anybody wants to speak on Zoom, raise your hand, you can raise your hand or wave on Zoom, raise your electric hand. No? All right, so I need a motion to close the discussion, public discussion.
I make a motion to close the public discussion.
So second,
Second,
okay,
Back to the board for any further questions or discussions before a motion.
One other quick question on the south side. The buildings, they're almost adjoining. So do you have any kind of roof overhang at all? Or is it? I don't believe the roof could overhang.
You can't, it's go straight, the wall goes straight up.
Go straight up, no, because she did mention no.
On Bay Ave.
On Bay Ave, so
Across
I'm
the
not-
mountain.
any other comments or thoughts from the board before we ask for a motion? I just want to make one comment. I do think that I know one of the variances is to have some relief from the impervious versus pervious. And when you look at the whole property and the fact that a huge percentage of the larger percentage of property is going to be residential now, that there's so much more pervious now than there ever was in the past. And I think that when you take that in mind, we are greatly increasing the amount of pervious property than anything we've had in the past.
I agree, Nancy.
And Nancy, to follow up with that, when they came before us with the subdivision, we asked the question, what is the amount of impervious coverage with the residential properties? And it's 66% is what was represented at that time.
Yeah, which is great. I think the plan looks good, and I think it is what Beach Haven's looking for, this sort of mixed use with just two condos above. I think it's a, a great opportunity for somebody that wanted to have a business and live above their business. Or they can go the other way around, but I think I think it looks very nice. Does anybody want to make a motion?
So I would like to make a motion to approve this base. My thinking is along your lines about the impervious coverage. When we look at the total site and there being 5 houses now and basically the impervious coverage increasing on that total area there. So I would make a motion to approve this project.
Yeah, with the conditions that we.
Any motion is subject to the testimony and all of the conditions of approval that we discussed. So
Right.
we would then, so the motion to grant the application for preliminary and final major site plan approval with the variance for impervious coverage and the no loading zone.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Ballmiller,
Yes.
Mrs. Eddles,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Jenna,
Yes.
Mr. Tinquist,
Yes.
Mr. Balbo,
Yes.
Mr. Wanger,
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. King
Miss
is,
and Miss King.
No,
Oh,
King
sorry,
is a
sorry.
conflict. So, Mr. Al.
Mr. Halpern,
Yes.
application approved.
Thank you.
All right. On to our next case, which is the one on Second Street, right? It's 425 Second Street.
Greg Gundy, 424 Center Street, Beach Haven.
Sorry, it wasn't time. Your name, please.
Greg Gundy,
Where are you guys?
424 Center Street, Beach Haven.
You raise your right hand, your name, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you give before the board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And what is your relationship to the applicant, please?
I am the contractor and she's my girlfriend.
Kavanaugh going to testify?
I'm going to testify on her behalf.
It's your application, sir, so is she going to testify? If she is, I need her to raise her right hand. I need to
Sure.
swear her in.
Sure.
Okay, can you raise your right hand? Your name, please,
Maureen Kavanaugh,
and where do you reside?
425 Second Street, Beach Haven.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We're here for your consideration to change the distance between our curb cuts, curb depressions from 22 feet to 18'2". We currently have one curb cut that's 14'6" on the existing property. We've since raised the house and added a second garage door, and we need access to that garage door. So we were approved to change the 14'6" curb cut down to 8 foot on the right-hand side, and to add a 8-foot curb drop, 22 feet between the two curb drops to allow for a parking spot. We're here to ask you to change that 22-foot measurement to 18'2" between curb drops for a couple of reasons. Aesthetically, the house would look a lot better with two symmetrical curb drops. And the average car is between 16 foot and 15'6" and 16 feet. So that considered with the fact that there's a driveway on both sides of the parking spot, it's not really parallel parking at that point. any car could negotiate with no problem in front of that to get into that spot. We previously had one on-site parking spot and one internal parking spot. We now have the ability to have 2 on that same side and 3 on this side. So we're adding an additional 3 parking spots on site. And all we're asking is to change the 18-foot the 22-foot between the parking spots, shrink it down to 18-foot 2. We're going to close down the one opening from 14-foot 6 and add a new opening in front of center line of the garage door on this side. We have 50-foot frontage right now, and we'd hope for your consideration. I do. Who do I show them?
We'll mark then. How many photos do you have? Do you have copies or what kind of photos?
I have a current survey.
I don't
with
think
photos.
that's what I was looking for, but we can look at the survey if you want us to. Do you have actual photos in the front?
I do on my phone.
Couple hundred.
The photos, if you want to show photos of the board, they really need, we should have been printed and really from Mark and given to the board. They become part of the record. You can't really do that with your phone. We have the survey, the board secretary put the survey up on the screen. That helps. I don't know if there's any questions.
Well, I have a diagram if that helps.
That might help.
I went by and looked at it, so I know what it looked like.
Oh, I did the same, so I.
For the record, I'm gonna mark the diagram as A1, applicant 1.
Yeah, I know.
You can share this with the board members.
So this is what you're requesting, or this is what it?
That's what I'm requesting. We were approved for, to change the right-hand curb cut or the east side curb cut from 14.6 down to 8 to allow for more room in the middle. And we were approved for an 8-foot drop in front of the, this is the problem. It's not in front of the garage door, the center line. It's offset, which doesn't look very aesthetically pleasing. And it's also somewhat of a hazard backing out of the driveway because there would be the front end of a parked car if you were to inadvertently back up into a parked car coming out of your own driveway. So I think 18-foot 6 is a big enough. If you're parallel parking a car in there, it's one thing. You're not going to have to parallel park because there's a full driveway that's not going to have a car in it over here and a full driveway over here. So you can pretty much get any size car in there with no problem.
Right, so the ordinance was set up with 22 feet between them to allow a park between them. And with the 8-foot driveway, giving enough maneuverability to pull in and out without hitting the parallel park. I mean, a normal parking space is 9 by 18, when you pull in head on. So the applicant suggested that he drops down to 18 feet, and with the 2 driveway openings, a car can certainly get into a parallel space because you got extra room on either side of the 2 driveways. So it's up to the board whether they want to consider allowing the reduced distance between the driveways, or you leave it the way it is, and they would have to, the driveway on the east side, when they drive in, they would have to kind of maneuver, make the pavers wider behind the sidewalk to get in front of the garage.
Is this a new house?
No.
It's a raise with a addition alteration.
Yeah, 'cause I'm looking at it. It looks like a brand new house. That's why I'm.
That's what we're looking for.
Right, well, if you're designing a brand new house, my feeling is you design it within the ordinances that we have. If it's.
But it isn't in a brand new house.
It's not brand new.
It's a
It's
renovation
remodeled.
with a facelift on it and a raise.
Did the original house have 2 garage openings?
It had one on the west side.
So it only had 1 garage
Yes,
opening? Okay,
yes.
so you designed another garage opening, so you knew what ordinances were in place.
Yes, we did. That's why I'm here. Then we realized
It's not really a hardship because you designed this way.
Actually, it's a self-created hardship.
It's a self-created.
right, yes.
That's not good for you.
Well,
I'm just.
I didn't realize how bad it was until I,
understand it, so the board knows, and so you understand, and I know you chose to present this application without the benefit of the council. Ms. Bellmer's comments are one point, self-created hardships are not a basis for a land use board to grant a variance, and so the board remembers. This application is for what's called a C2 or a bulk variance. The standard is whether or not the purposes of the land use law will be advanced. And the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, and the benefits of the variance outweigh the detriment, and the variance will not substantially impair the intent or the purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. No bulk variance should be granted when merely the purposes of the owner will be advanced. That's the standard against which this board has to decide whether or not to grant this application. Self-created hardships don't qualify for purposes of granting a bulk variance. Now, that all being said, you've heard the testimony this evening about how this may be more aesthetically pleasing. It's up to the board to make that decision, but that's what we have in front of us. There's no other witnesses, correct?
I have neighbors here that could testify. Oh, professional? No.
Okay.
What would be the advantages or disadvantage to us, to the town of Beach Haven by awarding you this variance?
There's no disadvantage because you're an 18-foot unless you tell me that an 18-foot parking spot is not a big enough spot for your average car. And my understanding, it's 15'6" to 16 feet is your average car. Now, if you were to negotiate parallel parking in that middle space, yeah, that may be a little tight. Because you have the driveway on the right side and the driveway on the left side, you could pull you don't have to negotiate it. You're in regard, it's like you could pull straight in, not straight in, but drive right in. And aesthetically pleasing from the front. We spent a lot of money to make it aesthetically pleasing. We wanted to keep it somewhat symmetrical so that this driveway doesn't wind up on the neighbor's, almost on the neighbor's property, the outlet into the street. And if I back directly out of the driveway, there's a chance that I'm gonna hit the front quarter panel of the car in the way it is right now. It has the potential of hitting a car coming back into the street. The way I'm proposing it is it's straight back and the car has 18 feet and they shouldn't be in that zone, and we didn't lose anything as far as parking. And we gained, by doing this addition, we gained 3 on-site parking spots on this on this side, and we're keeping the 2 that we had already.
Are we losing a parking spot for the public?
No, none whatsoever. You're just shrinking it down from the proposed, the 22-foot, the approved 22-foot down to 18'2".
Mr. Little, can you comment on that? Excuse me? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the borough did the ordinance based on 22. The only other thought I had is if the board wasn't going to approve this, you could always slide the one space over a little bit and still get closer to out in the center and still keep the 22 foot. I mean, the concern is with 22 foot, I understand a car shorter than 22, but when you're parallel parking in some of these narrower streets and you're pulling in, with that car right up against one driveway or the other, it gets hard to turn into your parking space and back out. So, yeah, like you said, the town thought quite a bit about this. Originally, people came and asked about split driveways. That wasn't in the ordinance until a few years ago. And more houses are having split drives, and the borough gave the option for this to occur. And I don't think they granted any waivers to reduce this 22 down to 18.
If this variance were to be granted, are they losing a parking spot on the street?
No, but it's just making it a lot, 18 foot instead of 22. You're not going to lose the space based on car length, but maneuverability in and out of these driveways might be different.
Well, the maneuverability for them would be easier, but for the public that wants to park between those 2 driveways would be more difficult, correct?
This is a congested area. Does the board realize where this is?
These are the 2 driveways on either side. There's nobody.
I drove by.
Very congested.
Wait, one at a time, please. We gotta keep the record clean.
we're saying is this is a congested area and, you know, things being this tight, it becomes an issue. So one of the options, if the board didn't approve it, you could always slide the easterly one over 2 feet and that would pull the other one in and still keep the 22. It would be offset slightly, but you might have enough room to get.
Could you get in the garages?
Without, what's that?
Could you get in those garages?
You probably could. I have to tell you, other towns have, we allow a 24-foot curb cut for a 2-car garage.
Right.
Ship-on allows 20. Well, they get these split garages and the person puts the 20-foot depressed curb in the middle. And once you get beyond the sidewalk, they flare the pavers out. And they're building them that way and they don't have a split driveway. So we created a split driveway ordinance, what we thought to make things easier for people with split driveways. And this is probably the first waiver we've ever seen for this. Most people are adjusting or you could do a 24-foot driveway opening in the middle. And then as you get past the sidewalk, widen out your pavers and you could pull in and, you know, drive to the right or left. So either one of those options works, or you slide the easterly driveway open over a couple feet and line them up better. They won't be exactly lined up with the garage doors, but you get what you need.
Would either of those two alternatives require a variance?
No.
So, but the point is, I think if the board were to deny this application, it's not like they don't have the ability
To adjust.
and create something that's within the ordinance requirements. But again, it's up to the board.
And by adjusting, they can still get the 2 cars in the 2-car
You have
garage.
to- Right now, the one driveway is lined up perfectly, the other one's offset. So if you even them up a little bit, yeah, it might work.
I mean, I went and looked at it and it looked kind of weird.
Yeah.
I mean, the driveway on the west side, it looked almost impossible to get into that. But I mean, again, the place, I mean, the curb cut's already there.
Well, the one curb cut's 14.6, but they don't have 2 yet.
Okay, so that's
So
part of
that hasn't.
They
been
just have the
constructed
garage
yet, and that's why we're
constructed.
doing
Right.
that.
I mean, it's just like one garage has a curb cut and the other doesn't.
Right now.
You can still have 2 curb cuts. You just have to have 22 feet in between.
Mhm.
You're allowed to have 2 8-foot curb cuts.
Right, so you.
Right. They just don't have the 22 feet in between because they created they created their own hardship.
Okay.
May I speak? So
Yes, I'm sure.
yes?
Yes, sure.
So the option of putting a one drop in the middle, the front stairs are all there and the utilities are all in the front there. So that kind of doesn't work in that instance. And I can understand where you're coming from on the 22-foot ordinance. If you didn't have a parking spot, a driveway drop here and a driveway drop here. So you have 50 foot of frontage to negotiate your parking, your parking. So it's really not, I know it's congested, believe me, I know it's congested there. There will be no congestion there because you can only get 1 car there anyway. And you have 50 feet to you actually have more than that. You have 50 plus another 8 or 9 with the neighbors. So you have 59 feet to negotiate 1 single parking spot. So the 22 feet was created with parallel, I would think was created with parallel parking in mind on a congested street. I don't think it applies here whatsoever. This is nearly a 60-foot run to park a 18-foot car.
As long as you don't have a car sticking out in the street from your driveway.
Well, I'll make sure that doesn't happen. We live there, so we're not gonna have renters coming and going either.
I have a question. When I looked around the area, the rest of the blocks seem to be relatively tight. Just about the witness spots. Would you check anything adjacent to it, like how much room you have in the curb cuts? Because they were 21.
I don't
So
follow.
the adjacent properties.
The adjacent properties were a little under to 22, just slightly under 21, 21. And then there's a 30-foot run to the next, to the right-hand neighbor's front. So you can get two cars to the right. And then there's close to 59 feet of clear ceiling in front of this house to park one car.
I don't see any problem personally. With the one, as long as it's not, we're not losing a parking spot to the town.
No.
I don't know whether does anybody else have any questions before we open the floor to the public?
I don't know, like, sort of the typical parking spots, I know whenever we're doing non-private. So is that really the case for coming really from the wind? So the two driveways, centering the two driveways, certainly gives plenty of ability.
Well, the 22 again was there to give you plenty of room to pull in and out of your driveway. We're limiting the width of the opening on 8 feet. Okay, so it's a little more than just the parallel. But it's up to the board. The board can
We're not.
You've heard our comments and the board can do what they'd like.
Any other questions? Shall we, is there a motion to open? Comments?
Open it to the floor.
Second,
I'll second it.
okay, anybody on Zoom or in the audience would like to come forward and speak?
Good evening. My name is Jim Chula. I live at 422nd Street.
The last name, can please?
Ciulla, Chula.
Just show up and raise your right hand. You swear from the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I do. We live directly across the street from Rini. We've watched Greg work on his house for quite a bit of time. They've done a beautiful job on it. It's really aesthetically pleasing. And they've worked hard. Typically, when you look at a house, the driveway lines up with the garage. And in this case, if you don't grant them the variance, the driveway on one side or both sides will not line up with the garage. So for me, who lives across the street, I like it to look aesthetically pleasing with the driveway straight aligned. But it's also difficult to back out of the driveway or a garage when you're not going straight and you have to go on an angle and to back out into the street. So from a safety perspective, I think the straight driveway would be the best answer to that. They also, like Greg had mentioned, they've added 2 or 3 off-site parking spaces by doing this. They added the second garage, so there's space inside the garage and there's extra space in the second driveway that they made. So unlike some of the other things that are asked for, what we're looking for is trying to get cars off the street, and they've done that. So I'm here to ask that you do grant them the variance. Thank you.
Pat O'Donnell, 432 Dock Road, Beach Haven. I'm here to ask for the same thing that,
You swear from
Yeah.
the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I do.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm here to ask for the same thing as the gentleman before me, that you grant these people their variance. As far as parking a car there and with the spot, if you have 2 driveways and then a parking area of 18 feet 2, you should have no problem pulling a car in there. I don't think that should be an issue. Other than that, I just think they should get what they're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
Anybody else? Anybody on Zoom?
No.
I have a motion to close the floor.
I so move.
So second,
Second.
okay. Any more questions or comments?
There are none, then we just need a motion to approve or deny.
Well, does anybody, I don't see any disadvantages to the town to let them put a curb cut in front of each garage. I personally, having one eye, I know how difficult it is for me sometimes to back up and to have to do on a curve. I think I'd be a little nervous. I mean, not everybody just says one eye. But basically, I don't see any problems with it, but I'd like to know what the rest of you feel.
But what is your reasoning for? Because when you're not following the law, there has to be.
Aesthetically attractive and because it's safer for them and we're not losing any off-street parking.
No, we're not, but that means that everyone should have that ability then if they built the house incorrectly. This is a self-built hardship. So, I mean, we're just gonna open the door. I know every application, holds its own, but there's nothing in this application as far as a hardship that we would be granting that waiver. So
True.
it's the law. That's. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you're very nice people. You have neighbors, obviously, you get along in the community, but that's not the way that ordinances and asking for variances, that's not how it works. There is no evidence to grant a waiver for this.
I realize that.
Well,
I mean, it's difficult. I mean.
it's difficult and unfortunate, but that's the way that the law is.
Every board member has the right to vote whichever way the member feels is appropriate.
Appropriate.
The way you vote, though, will depend on the motion. So let's get a motion, unless there's further discussion, and then depending on
Nancy?
the motion, we'll go from there. Mr. Stevens?
Nancy,
Yes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application as submitted. I think it's an improvement on a safety issue. So I'd like to make the motion to approve the application.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Because this is a variance application only and not an application for site plan, we're sitting as a zoning board, mayor and Ms. Bellmiller, you can vote because it's not a D variance, but because it's just an application for a bulk variance, only the 7 members will vote, so it'll be, okay, you have it?
I got it. Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Ballmiller,
No.
Mrs. Eddles,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Jenna,
Yes.
Mr. Tinquist,
Yes.
Mr. Balbo.
Yes.
Application approved.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, now we move on to, I believe, and I need the agenda here. We move on to approval of the minutes. Sure, anybody would like to approve the minutes? Assume everybody read them. I know John did.
I always do.
I know
I'd
you
like to
did.
make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
I wasn't at the last. I abstain.
Okay.
All right, now we have the bills. I saw the bills. Did everybody see the bills? Is there a motion to approve the bills?
Motion to approve the bills.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, now we're on to new business, and this relates to the 3-person committee. And one of the things I'd like to bring up is that I think the 3-person committee is wonderful because it saves all of us a lot of time. But I do think that when you're voting on a change of use, that needs to be brought to the council. For example, if you're going from a retail, we talked about this before, a retail to a food establishment, it's really a different situation where somebody might be cooking, or it draws a different number of people. It might bring more congestion to the area. And I think in the future, we really need to think about that. I think the 3-person committee should, and I used to be that way. I don't know what happened. I know, because I've been on the land use board since 2010. And I know back then, when there was a change of use, it did come to the board.
And what would be presented to the 3-person committee? Just hold it for the.
Who's bringing it to us?
Who is
Making
bringing-
that
So
decision.
let's, we can have this discussion
They deny it.
Well, session later, if anybody has
Okay.
questions for legal advice. The 3-person committee ordinance is really, it's an exception for site plan approval. And the way the ordinance reads is that if an applicant believes that the nature of the proposed use, occupancy, hours of operation, number of employees, on or off-site parking, square footage of the commercial area, loading, signage, landscaping and or buffering, and compliance with zoning regulations are essentially the same for the existing use, they can apply to the board for an exemption of the requirement to seek formal site plan approval. That application is submitted to the 3-person subcommittee. In the event the subcommittee finds that the proposed application will not essentially modify the existing use from the proposed use, the application for the exemption can be approved. That was done by our subcommittee in connection with the 5 applications that are on our agenda, that the decision's already been made. The ordinance goes on to say, what happens is the subcommittee's approval or disapproval is announced at the next public meeting and read into the record. So I've just read into the record, Gina would probably usually do it. All 5 of these have already been approved by our subcommittee. If any one of them were to have been denied, then what that means is the applicant would have to make an application for formal site plan approval and would come before the entire board. That hasn't happened yet. So in compliance with our existing ordinance, and then like we've said before, and as the board knows, the ordinance can be changed. That's something that this board doesn't do. That's something Borough Council does if they see it to be so appropriate. But under the existing ordinance, an applicant has the right to make an application for an exception from formal site plan approval. That was done in connection with all 5 of the matters that are before us this evening, and all 5 have been approved by your subcommittee. So there's no further action for this board to take tonight. Again, we can have discussion as much as we want. I won't give legal advice in a public meeting. I can do it in closed session. Certainly, if a board member wants to have a discussion with me after the meeting, one-on-one, we can do that. But for purposes of this meeting, and so we can bring this meeting to a close, 5 applications have been made for a waiver of site plan approval. They're on the agenda. They are, just for the record, Bikini Headquarters, K&CO Living, Greenhead Salad Company, Sandwich Spot, and Pink's Taqueria and Taqueria, and the Cheese Shop too. And they've all been approved by the subcommittee. So that's been read into the record, and that addresses that matter on the agenda.
But let me just ask you, the rules and regulations relating to the 3-person, they would all fit under that. I mean, it's up to
It's up to the subcommittee to
the
decide whether or not, the issue for the committee is simply this, whether or not the proposed application for the exemption from site plan approval will or will not essentially modify the existing use from the proposed use. In all 5 situations before us tonight, the subcommittee determined that they will not essentially modify the existing use from the proposed use, and therefore granted the 5 applications.
Okay. So there's no.
Nothing further for this
It
board
was
to
just
do
a point of
tonight. We're just,
information.
and it has to be on the agenda because our ordinance says we read the subcommittee's determination into the record, and that's what we're doing.
Well, that's good, and I hope. So that's it.
So that's it, just a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
I'm not doing it again.
Motion to
I
adjourn.
so hope that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I said at the same time. as
All in
Penny,
favor?
yes.
All right, so.